calling all educators with a passion for teaching and a health for faith. Get ready for a transformative journey with the Educators with Oil podcast, where host Ronnette Branham is dedicated to helping teachers become better through biblical strategies.
Good evening. If you're joining me live, welcome. And if you're listening later, I am glad you're here. I am Ronnette Branham, and this is the Educators with Oil podcast, a space for educators who want to teach with wisdom, clarity, and integrity without losing themselves in the process. Here, we talk about identity before instruction and discernment over performance, and also about guarding that oil that sustains your calling. Today's episode is titled When Confidence Wavers, Recentering Teacher Identity. Before we go any further, I want to say this clearly. This conversation is for educators who are still standing. Not the ones who quit, not the ones who checked out emotionally, but the ones who keep showing up even when something feels off. If that's you, you're in the right place. This is not a loud conversation. It's not rushed. It's not meant to correct anyone. It's meant to steady you. There are moments, even for confident educators, when confidence wavers. Not collapses, not disappears, just wavers. You're still standing up, still planning, still teaching, but something feels unsteady. You start second guessing decisions you used to make with ease. You hesitate before speaking up. You replay conversations longer than necessary, especially the ones that you won, but still somehow question. You wonder when teaching started feeling heavier than it used to. And quietly, often privately, you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Sometimes you feel like that, something's wrong. So let me say it plainly, because we complicate this too much. We think something's wrong with us. Nothing's wrong with you. Confidence wavering is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're in the wrong profession, and it's not proof that you lost your effectiveness. It's not. More often than not, confidence wavers because identity has been interrupted somewhere. Let me tell you what that interruption actually looks like. It doesn't come with an announcement. There's a moment when someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Today," I said this on. Today is the day that you start doubting yourself. I don't know. It feels like that's what somebody would do. It happens quietly. One decision you hesitate on. One moment you replay too long. One moment where you think, that didn't used to bother me. Then uh the system is very good at mislabeling the problem. When we talk about the system the other day, sometimes we think about what is happening with the system that we work in and then within ourselves. So when confidence wavers, the responses are predictable. More professional development, the system is going to tell you that. People in the system, more data meetings, more strategies, more reflection, usually framed as correction, right? Somehow there's always more meetings. Let me describe what this looks like in real life. You don't walk into these spaces doubting yourself. You walk in tired. You walk in carrying context. No spreadsheet can hold. Like, what are you thinking about? And slowly the message becomes, if something feels off, It must be you. That happens more times than none. Sometimes it's data versus discernment, fidelity versus wisdom. Working with fidelity, following to the letter. Or does this child need something particular right this moment? Approval versus alignment. What should I be doing? Looking for their approval, making sure I'm checking off boxes, or should I be aligned with my calling? But most educators experiencing self-doubt are not lacking information. We're not lacking information. We have plenty of information. We are overloaded with information. We don't need more tools. We don't need recentering. Actually, confidence is not lost when we stop knowing what to do. It erodes when we stop knowing who we are, why we're doing it. The erosion is subtle. It looks like teaching to avoid criticism. We're doing what we're supposed to do so they won't criticize us and say that this is off. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be following that with fidelity. That's what's happening. That is what happens. Instead of teaching to serve students, it looks like measuring success by approval. I'm successful because they approve of me. We talked about that last week, where we were talking about the calling versus the directives. What is that they want, right? And it looks like that measuring that success by approval instead of alignment. It looks like shrinking our language. It does. Like we're stepping back and just to stay safe. And over time, confidence begins to feel conditional. So I'm confident when they like what I'm doing. I'm confident when I check off the boxes for those people. When confidence depends on external validation, it will always be unstable. And that's true. We're thinking about what happens what do they tell us to do? Because if it depends on the directives from administration changes over time. Curriculums change over time, but your identity does not change. And that is one thing that we have to understand. So if we walk in as ourselves, no matter where we go, what class we're in, what subject we're teaching, we'll be stable. But when we get off of that, when we start looking at, like I said, confidence as approval for confidence, that when it gets, that's when things get a little shaky, a little wavering. But I think I made a mistake back, going a little fast, that we need to recenter. We need to remember who we are and recenter, because a lot of times we forget. And I talked about last week where we sometimes say yes to things little by little. We start changing, we start losing ourselves because we're saying yes to things we don't feel right. That cognitive dissonance that happens where we know we want to do this, or we should be, this is what we're called to do, but yet we're following that directive that's over there, even though it's not aligned with our classroom, with our calling, with our students. But we get stuck in that, oh, they're going to say I'm a great teacher because I'm following letter by letter what they tell me to do. So we have to look at that and be careful how we what we are aligned with. We want to be aligned with our calling, and then everything else will fall in line, because you're in there to do what it is you're called to do. You're in there to educate your students, making sure they come out with what they need, that they are served well, not did I check off the boxes. We have to remember that. That's something that we just keep talking about till this is, I think, part 4 of this identity before instruction. So this is where identity before instruction matters. Identity before instructions, it's not a slogan. So I say that's my trademark, that identity before instruction, but it's not a slogan. It's an order of operations. It is. Who you are comes before how you teach, no matter what, always. Before the lesson plan, before the observation, it comes, who you are, it comes before all of that, before the evaluation, before the feedback cycle. When identity leads, you teach with internal permission. You get permission from here, from inside. You respond instead of react. You discern instead of comply. What should I do? What do my students need right now? You move with clarity instead of fear. But when identity is displaced, you perform. Oh, let me perform because here comes my administrator. Let me perform because another person is coming in my classroom. You brace yourself. You survive. We don't want to survive. We want to thrive in our environment. Confidence doesn't appear in those moments. It can't, because you're looking for somebody to boost you up. It gets buried under pressure. And pressure cannot sustain confidence. Only clarity can. You do not need to build confidence. You need to return to alignment. So let's slow this down. Identity before instruction does not mean ignoring the expectations, of the curriculum. It doesn't mean that. I always make sure that when I speak like this, that you understand I'm not telling you to go against I'm not telling you to go against your directives. I'm not telling you to go against your curriculum. It's just that you have to be you first, and then everything else will fall in line. I promise you it will. You won't be stressed out. You won't. Everything will be stable. So it means you refuse to let expectations rename you. You still plan. Yeah, you have to plan. You still plan. You still assess. You still comply where you must. You have to comply to. You have to have structure. But you do not let any of that tell you who you are. This is where you speak directly to who you are, right? You have to know who you are. You're strong, right? You're called to teach. You're bold. You're confident, because confidence comes from knowing who you are. One of the fastest ways confidence erodes is when calling and compliance get confused. Calling, remember, is internal. Compliance is external. Those external things that are calling you, telling you what to do. Calling is enduring. Compliance is temporary. Calling asks, who have I been entrusted to be? Compliance is required. Compliance asks, what is required of me right now? So when I say that compliance is temporary, so you are who you are. I used to teach preschool. I was me. I was called to teach when I taught preschool, when I taught computers, when I subbed, when I tutored, when I did any of that, that I still was who I am. And I did it out of that. I tutored out of that. I knew I was called to make a difference in these students' lives. But compliance, is temporary because administration changes, directives change. This week we're starting. Last week I heard it. This week we're changed how we're doing our reading assessments. The program that we're using something totally different than we used last year and the year before, probably the year before that, right? And then now, yeah, absolutely, the year before that. Every single year for the past maybe 2 years at a time, we kept the same assessment for reading, for literacy assessment. Now it's something new. So it's going to be temporary. So you can't say, I am going to comply with this benchmark assessment from the benchmark program, from the DRAs, from iReady. I'm going to comply with that because each time it's changing. It's something different they're asking you. They may have you assessing the students for comprehension. And then next year, they won't ask you any comprehension. You may not utilize that tool, but that's going to change. So that's temporary. But your calling is not, because you're called to educate your students no matter what. You're called to serve your students well, no matter what, right? So we walk into that. That is just something that we have to understand, because these things are going to change yearly, monthly, within the school year. So compliance changes, calling does not. Simple as that. If we walk into that, we'll remember the problem is not compliance. Remember, the problem is allowing compliance to redefine you. When that happens, you stop leading with who you are, and you start leading with what you can't do right now. And I because I know what I'm about to say, I get excited because you don't say it out loud, but it shows up in how you explain yourself, right? You explain yourself. You might say, I would normally, but, so you fill at it. Right now, we're not allowed to, right? This year is different because without realizing, you let your limitations become your introduction. That's how you're introducing yourself. Why usually, but that kind of stuff. That's not walking in your calling at all. It's absolutely not. Um, sit sit with that for a moment, right? Just sit with that. Those you fill in those blanks. Um, Not what you teach, not where you teach, but how you explain yourself lately. That's not who you are, that's where you are. What was supposed to be situational starts sounding like identity, right? A rough year starts feeling like a rough you. That's just that's just how it starts to be. A broken system starts feeling like personal failure. We've been there. We've all been there. And that's dangerous because conditions change, but identity is not supposed to. It's not supposed to change. I remember talking about I remember talking about when we had the when I did the DLI, and it was it was hard. I couldn't really do it. I couldn't do it the way they set it out. It just didn't work. Right. And then it was like, I can't do this. I feel like I'm a failure every single day. I go in and try something new. It feels like I'm a failure because I'm not hitting the mark. I'm not doing what it is they tell me. They're telling me to do the way they say it's doable. This is doable. It's not that. I wasn't able to do it, and I felt like I wasn't hitting the mark, and it just wasn't a good feeling at all. It wasn't a good feeling. One second. One second. Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry. I was clicking on some things. Uh, so somewhere along the way, adaptation gets confused with identity lost. Adaptation is wisdom. Identity loss is erosion. But when pressure stays long enough, everything starts to feel like compromise. You know that feeling like you're compromising the way you teach, what you're saying, things that you're adding and taking away. Are you missing the mark with your students? You adjust your methods and start wondering if you're losing yourself. You shift your approach and begin questioning your calling. So that's true. We know what we need to do for our students, but for instance, me trying to keep up with the schedule, working with the schedule, I have to do this. I have 15 minutes for phonics. I have 40 minutes for reading workshop, writing workshop, all that. I have to get science in before a special, all that stuff. And then it's like, I'm trying to teach this with fidelity. I'm running out of time. And then it's just like, what's happening here? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I meeting the students' needs? I don't think so. I'm checking off the boxes, but am I meeting their needs? So when you start questioning your calling, that's not weakness at all. It just you misaligned. That's misinterpretation. You adapt to survive, not to disappear. So we're surviving and disappearing at the same time, just because we're trying to keep up, and we're not. Because if we're struggling to keep up, this means like we're out of alignment. We're trying to perform. That's what I get out of that we're performing, and we don't want to disappear. Confidence cannot survive confusion. When you feel all confused and all these things are happening, you're not doing what you should be doing. It's confusion, and then you can't feel confident because you're trying to perform, keep up with what they're telling you. Because confidence, it requires coherence, and coherence comes from centering your calling. being centered in who you are. Even compliance, while compliance is navigated at the same time. So let's just think about this. Recentering is not dramatic, it's deliberate. And most of the time it happens quietly. Here are 3 recentering moves. So I'm not asking you to write anything down. I just want you to listen, right? I just want you to listen. First, you're going to name before you navigate. Before you respond to the situation, name who you are. Not the task, not the frustration, not the pressure. Identity first, right? Identity first. Strategy after that. Strategy second. So when identity is named first, decisions stop feeling chaotic. So if you're like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, and then you think about that first, then you're set, putting your identity on the back burner. We're not doing that. Put your identity first, and then it won't seem chaotic. So second, separate worth from output. You're not your evaluation cycle. You're not your data points. You are not your hardest day. Yeah, we feel like that sometimes. Confidence stabilizes. So when worth is no longer tied to performance, right? Then we get a little more stable. So if we're thinking, oh, let me do this, then I'm tying my worth to what my output is, then I feel better about myself, and that's not cool. And then you start losing who you are. You feel like at the beginning, oh, they acknowledge me. Oh, they said I am meeting the mark. They're scoring me all fours, all fours. So I feel confident. But what happens when the curriculum changes and you really are not in line with that? Then what? And then you get in 2s and 3s and you're like, I'm not worth that much. I'm not a great teacher. No, it can't be. You stand up for who you are, stand in who you are, and then watch you grow, watch you feel more stable than if you're trying to meet all these needs at the same time. And third, return to your first assignment. Why did you teach? Not a polished answer, but an honest answer. This place still holds clarity. Why did I start teaching? I want to make a difference, right? I want to serve students. Not because it was easier, but because it was aligned. It was aligned. Recentering happens when you return there without apology. Go back to that first place. You know how we always in church talking about return to your first love. What did I do? Why was I here in the beginning? Right? You could always rethink that. Stop and recenter. Right? Who am I? Why am I here? Let's figure this out. And that is something that we can do no matter what. So I want to leave you with this. I'm going to leave you with this. You are not behind. You are not late. You're not. You're not failing. You are recalibrating. We have to recalibrate. We have to go back to who we are. Identity is the foundation. Calling is the anchor. That's just what it is. That's just what it is. Voice is the expression of that anchor, of that calling, of that identity. Wisdom is the discernment. Let me see if this child needs this right now. I'm going to stop everything and we're going to regroup, right? When confidence wavers, return to that identity because it hasn't moved. It has not. The only thing that has moved is the directives, the curriculums, the programs that you're using because they keep changing. They're always going to keep changing because you're going to have new administrators and they're going to come in with their own ideas and what they think works. So just go back to that. If this conversation found you in a tender place, understand that's not weakness. That's something that happens. That means that's awareness. So as we close, I want to offer you a place to continue this work. If this in the comments, let me find it before I start talking. In the comments, I have Where is it? Where is it? Not in the comments. I'm gonna put it on the board. There's a QR code for you to click, and I'll add you to my mailing list, right? And this link, you're going to join my mailing list if you would like. And again, this is not about promotion. It's about continuation of these topics, continuation of what we talk about. If you want resources, I'll add. This is where I share language, reflections, and frameworks for educators who want to teach from identity, not pressure to perform, because we have been teaching from pressure to perform for so long, it just gets old. And if your school, your district, or organization is ready to hold this conversation together, you'll also find information there about bringing this work into your space through speaking and professional learning, professional development. There's no urgency, no obligation, just an open door for educators who know there is more steadiness available. And that's what we want to be, is steady in our calling. So with that, I just want to go back really quick. I want to go back to those three. Let me find it. The last three things that I just gave you, so we'll understand this is how we realign with our purpose, how we recenter with our calling, our purpose. Remember, our calling is who we are. Our purpose is why we're here. And then we want to teach out of freedom, and we want to talk about what difference we can make from where we are. So again, I'm going to say first name before you navigate, before you respond to a situation. Name who you are, not what you have to do, but name who you are. Second thing you're going to do is separate your worth from your output. Just because we're struggling with that output, that doesn't mean I'm not a great teacher, I'm not a great educator. That doesn't mean I'm not walking in my calling, right? We don't want our worth to be tied to performance. And then third, return to your first assignment. Why did you teach when you first began to teach? When you decided you want to be a teacher, what did you do? So think about that answer. Don't think about a perfect answer. Think about the real answer, the true answer. Why am I here? So again, just return to that. Don't apologize for it. Just return to that and recenter. And with that, I just want to say, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Share with another educator who could benefit from these teachings of identity before calling. And this right here, up here, can you see that? Up there in the corner is my QR code for my mailing list. So you could click on that. There'll be a small questionnaire, and then you'll be added to my mailing list. And once I email you, you can email me back, and then I'll give you information, any notes, anything to help us move along with this identity before calling. Again, so thank you. And with that, thank you, and have a blessed rest of your day.
Subscribe to Educators with Oil podcast on your preferred platform and join Ronnette on this mission to empower teachers through the wisdom of the Bible. Because when biblical strategies meet the classroom, extraordinary teaching happens.
Educators, let's shine a light on our classrooms. See you on Educators with Oil podcast, where teaching and faith unite.